Hello and a warm welcome to the Philips African Dialogues. I'm Samantha. Now, according to statistics, only 1 in 4 Africans have access to electricity. Now, although strides have been made to bridge the gap, the continent still faces significant challenges, including, of course, a lack of energy infrastructure. Yet as Africa is blessed with an abundance of sunlight, could solar technologies be the catalyst to leapfrog the continent's energy challenges? That's a hot topic of debate this evening, and joining me in studio to share their views on Lighting Africa, JJ van Dongen, CEO and Senior Vice President for Philips Africa, Andrew Etzinger, Senior General Manager for Integrated Demand Management at Eskom, and Irvan Damon, former Ambassador of Sustainable Energy Society of Southern Africa, also known as SESSA, of course. And of course, joining us from our bureaus over in Nairobi, Itotia Njagi, Manager for Lighting Africa Program at the IFC. Itotia, thank you so much for joining us, of course, from Nairobi. I'll start off with you because, of course, the IFC has done a research report into the role of electricity on the continent, and of course, aptly titled the solar lighting for the base of the pyramids. Of course, that really fits into the topic tonight. But there are, of course, 1.3 billion people on the continent that don't have access to electricity. When it comes to Africa, how many of those are in the continent?
So thank you very much for inviting me to the studio today. So yes, indeed, we have a great big challenge in Africa because, as you have rightly stated, close to 75% of the population in Africa does not have access to the grid. And that really compromises their quality of life, as well as really having a great impact on kind of their social and economic life. So I think for us, for the Lighting Africa program, is a program that we have really taken a look at some of the emerging technologies, especially solar, that is really now providing a real alternative to the people who would otherwise be using kerosene as their source of lighting in Africa today. I think thanks to the technology developments that we have seen today, I think you now have good technologies that can provide a real viable alternative to kerosene lighting.
Mm-hmm. JJ, I suppose before we get into the solution to the problem, it's worth just pointing out the impact that the problem has on the continent when it comes to social impacts and economic impacts, and these, of course, very much integrated. Firstly, from your perspective, from the business perspective, how does a lack of energy and a lack of electricity affect the business environment? Well,
I think fundamentally, with 600+ million people in Africa without electricity, it impacts the entire fabric of society. It impacts education, it impacts education of children, impacts the work environment, which means that at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock at night, life comes to an end in many of these communities. And we saw recently when doing our Cape to Cairo, the real impact of doing introducing solar light into a village that doesn't have solar light. And what you see there is that the village comes alive again. It's not just about closing down at sunset. The village comes alive and you impact every part of society in that. So yes, it does impact the society, but therefore it has a ripple impact back to the opportunities that people can have in terms of business creation, people's education, in terms of the future prospects for their children and things like that.
So of course it is critical, really, and it is perhaps seen as the first building block to growth on the continent. Without electricity, you can't have anything else, really. You know, Andrew, first off, let's get your views on planning for the future, because Africa is a growing continent. We know that, it's clearly established. Sure. But when it comes to planning, you really need to look forward in terms of infrastructure needs. How do you forecast the demand needs? And of course, you know, given the context where Eskom fell short when it came to forecasting the needs just here in South Africa.
Forecasting is obviously critical, and the electricity industry is a long-term industry, so you can't look 10, 20, even 30 years these days. You need to look 50 years into the future and forecast what those needs are going to be. It's a difficult process because you need to look at economic growth, but you also need to look at technologies, and obviously something like energy efficiency coming in would reduce demand but still increase economic growth. So you have to be very careful, do a large amount of macroeconomic studies, social studies, in order to do the forecasting. Unfortunately, no matter what you forecast, it's going to be wrong. You can have your very best forecast, And it will, when you get 50 years into the future, it will be wrong.
I mean,
What's critical?
I remember speaking to an economist
Yeah.
from Renaissance
Yeah.
Capital, and they said if they can, give Africa advice, they were basically saying don't underestimate the need for energy. It will be the critical factor when it comes to growth in the future. And you're not talking about 5 years down the line, you're talking about 20 years down the line.
Yeah, to that I would add that you must be flexible. You need to respond very quickly to signs of increased economic growth, increased population, etc. Overbuilding is as devastating as underbuilding, and simply because it's a very expensive investment to create an electricity infrastructure. So you need to retain that flexibility. You need to have your plans ready to make sure that you have a good balance between supply and demand. But we in South Africa, of course, we're mindful that we had a shortage, but for the 15 years before that, we had a glut, a surplus, which was also not good. It meant that a lot of the country's resources were tied up in assets which were not being fully utilized. So forecasting critical, but be flexible, update your forecasts regularly to make sure that you're matching supply and demand optimally.
It's an extremely tough job. Irvan, what role does the South African consumer and the African consumer play when it comes to switching to more energy efficient product and really taking it upon themselves to reduce their energy consumption?
I think it's very important that the end user is educated, is made aware as to which products are trusted. So I think through civil society, through active engagement, through public-private partnerships, through NGOs, civil society, I think we should all engage in order to, I guess, get people to step up the energy ladder. So consumers have the power to demand more energy-efficient products. So the end user has the power to demand from whether it's a government program or from private companies doing business in South Africa, to demand products that meet certain standards and improve the quality of life. And at the same time, I guess, these products need to be energy efficient at the same time. So end users need to empower themselves. We need to educate them to demand from the private sector, from government, programs that allow them to climb up the energy ladder.
And of course, Eskom has been very involved in being proactive in this regard. Talk to us about the light bulb switching program, the rebate program, and specifically when it comes to that lamp exchange program. I mean, how much energy has been saved? How successful has it been?
It's been incredibly successful. We started the program about 5 or 6 years ago with traditional light bulbs, and we've changed out 54 million light bulbs across the country to CFL light bulbs. The savings, according to our auditors, have been around 2,000 megawatts, which is about half a power station which we've saved. On an evening peak of about 32,000 megawatts, 2,000 megawatts makes all the difference at the moment between a severe shortage and keeping the lights on. So it has made all the difference to the power sector in South Africa.
If we didn't have this system, would we have blackouts, have had blackouts essentially?
If we were consistently short of 2,000 megawatts every evening, no doubt. So you would have needed candles on an evening basis. What we are now doing is looking at other technologies, the downlighted technologies and other lights to replace them as well. So overall, the lighting technologies and energy efficient lighting technologies have advanced to such a stage now that replacing them is a quick win to free up capacity on the grid, and it's a program that we'll continue running, the largest of its kind in the world at the moment.
And of course, this is a program that feeds into your focus specifically in the type of products that you provide for the market.
Yeah, as Philips, we've been in lighting for more than 120 years. It's the basis of what Philips is. And as the world leader in that, we've been quite actively involved with Eskom in terms of the program, the rollout program. We've also been quite involved in terms of with the Central Energy Fund and other players here in the local market in terms of the factory we established, which supports this program. Also creates good job creation in Lesotho, where we have a factory producing CFLIs, or compact fluorescents. And so for the last 5 years, we've been actively involved with Eskom, and I can only congratulate Eskom in terms of what it's actually done. Because it has, as you said, saved us going into blackouts. It saved the economy in terms of...
Well, let's bring Itotia into the conversation, because Itotia, of course, you've been listening to this and very much South Africa focused, but of course, even just in Kenya, where you are at the moment, there's been a big drive into renewables. In fact, I think 20% of the energy in the country is sourced from renewable power. Just give us an idea of how attractive the renewable industry is in Kenya right now. Talk to us about specifically solar right now.
Right, so I think South Africa enjoys a relatively unique situation in regards to the high grid access rates. I think the rest of Africa is much lower than that, so I think the challenge is perhaps more or less on the demand and supply, because at the moment in some countries in Africa, close to 80% of the population not having access to the grid, then really the equation here is that how much power can you be able to get? So in regards to your question for Kenya, I think there's been a huge push. So Kenya is lucky that it's endowed with the enormous resources of geothermal power. So there's been a very great push from the government here to convert and ensure that at least the new grid expansions plan have heavily weighted on geothermal. But more specifically, when we look at solar, there's also been in Kenya a great push on solar home systems, which started off about 10 years ago. In fact, in the latest census for 2009, it indicated close to about, I think, 5% of the population were connected to solar. But those were solar home systems which are relatively, I think, expensive, maybe at about $200 to $300. I think the new innovation at the moment is solar lanterns, which are priced anywhere from about a retail price of about $25 to anywhere to $75. And then suddenly, I think, people who are not connected to the grid, rural consumers, have within their grasp basically solar products that they can be able to afford. And we've seen very good growth rates of these solar lanterns. In Kenya, if we look at 2011 over 2010, we basically saw a 94% growth in the sales of these products.
You talk about the affordability factor. Of course, that is a key. Who's sponsoring this solar lantern program? And talk to us about the rollout of it across the country. And is it going to be rolled out into other countries on the continent?
Right. So I think you've rightly said, I think it's always been an issue of pricing. I think consumers who are today using kerosene do realize that they have in their hands a very expensive kind of lighting solution. An average consumer or an average household in Africa is using about, spending about $10 a month on kerosene. And if you analyze that, that's about $120. So at a retail price of about anywhere between $25 to $70, you can see there are huge economies of scale that they enjoy, and it's a much more cost-effective product. But so the challenge really here is, and I think you had mentioned earlier when I think you were talking to the gentleman from Eskom, which is all about how do you create awareness for these products so that consumers can and then realize that these products are available in the market, and they can now be able to basically approach, if it's retail outlets or it's organizations like Philips who are having these products. And that's what really Lighting Africa is all about, trying to create the awareness of these products in the market, and at the same time really working with the manufacturers and local distributors to address some of the market entry barriers that they have been facing in tapping into this market. And this can range anywhere from the awareness I have just mentioned about to perhaps high tariffs that in turn serve to make these products quite expensive. Mm-hmm. In regards to the rollout of the program, so today we are having the program in Kenya and in Ghana, and that was really a pilot phase, just trying to address and to understand the market and the challenges. And we are now reasonably confident enough to be able to roll it in an additional 4 countries. So we are really looking at Nigeria, we're looking at Tanzania, and we're looking at Senegal, and we're looking at Ethiopia in the next phase of expansion. Yep. But I think the most important thing is that I think the manufacturers have realized and identified the potential in Africa, and they're also on their own independently making huge inroads into the continent.
JJ, what's your response to some of those comments that were made by Itotia?
Certainly, I can concur with the comments made there. We do see the area of solar lanterns as well as small home systems actually growing significantly, and as a company we're also involved in those areas. We do see the key thing for us to really make the major breakthrough, we believe, is in the area of how do you address those people who are earning less than $5 per day, really the base of the pyramid. Because while I understand $60 on an annual cost of $120 may sound logical, it's the daily cost. So the key thing is how do you actually sell, or how do you actually promote to the consumer in a sachet type model? Mm-hmm. We call it really, it's in some ways what Unilever and other companies did with shampoo in India. It's how do you now sell energy? They can buy their solar lantern on a daily basis. Mm. where they have an irregular supply of income, and how do you actually supply that to them to provide them a solution that they can actually then tap into this type of technology. That's a big focus for us as a company to actually move into that area, besides the normal standard retail type of approach.
Even in your experience, and of course promoting the use of energy efficient products, promoting the use of solar products in South Africa, what has been the uptake from South Africans, and how do you create the right type of product with the type of price tag that people are willing to pay?
Yeah, I just want to come to the earlier point. You're always going to have an uphill battle when kerosene is being subsidized. It's a very expensive fuel to burn. So I think that we have to address the subsidies, one issue on a policy level. I think Eskom's done a great job in terms of using less utility speak and more of a consumer tone in terms of exciting consumer sentiment when it comes to low carbon technologies like CFLs or solar water heating or heat pumps. So that's very important that you adopt the right consumer tone. And I think that's been missing for a while. So I love Eskom's campaign. So I think we need more of that.
And of course, you're talking about the 49 million campaign.
The 49 million, the billboards, the Mr. Geezer that comes to your front door, that's the sort of consumer tone we need. More importantly, there needs to be a sense of desire to want to buy into these products. And I think that's been missing as well. And just to be just to put it out there, we need to make adopting low carbon technologies sexy, cool, fashionable, and I think Philips is very good at doing that. So I think the consumer sentiment is there. Eskom's got a great rebate program in place for solar water heating and heat pumps, but we do need to ensure that we create the sense of desire, and that's marketing, that's being able to, I guess, break through those barriers and make it cool to adopt these low carbon technologies.
Of course, aspirational in a sense.
Sure.
To be greener.
Yeah, and you know what, and this is not only relevant to the urban population. If you look at our peri-urban rural population, there as well, you need to not forget that they would also like to be part of some sort of city connection, urban connection. So we need to continue that aspirational, desirable aspect right through from our urban, peri-urban settings to those deep rural areas, so that people can enjoy this thing called the CFL, or a 10-watt power panel, so they feel part of the bigger picture of adopting low carbon technology. I think that sense of aspiration needs to have a continuous theme throughout.
I think from an African perspective though, you know, the concept of, as you say, the people who are earning $5 or less a day, the sachet concept when it comes to energy products, how does that apply to Eskom? How do you create a product, or how do you create a rebate program that applies to people in low income bracket groups?
Well, I think, as Itotia has said, we have a slightly different situation in South Africa in that more than 80% of the South African population does have access to electricity. But it doesn't mean that it's always affordable. And we have to make sure that we make electricity a value-adding commodity in people's lives. And this means introducing technologies which actually reduce the consumption of electricity to make it more affordable. So we have, as Irvan has said, gone to considerable lengths on especially our CFL rollout program, as well as on our solar water heating program. And those are the two big uses of electricity in a home, in terms of lighting and water heating, that we've actively worked together with communities on. And we needed to do, in most cases, a free issue. That's where we've got the big penetration. The financial side of things is unfavorable in those communities that are desperately poor in many cases. So our CFL rollout has been free. It's been a free issue, and our solar water heating rollout has also been a free issue of now up to about 300,000 solar water heaters. So that's been very important to be able to understand the demographics, understand the affordability levels, and cater for that in terms of the products and services that we're offering.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things linking back to that, because you mentioned 80% of the population are linked to electricity in South Africa. We are involved in this last 12 months in a study in Mpumalanga. And in that particular study, we've supplied lanterns and other solar type solutions to a rural village that had no electricity. And the results, in terms of, it was more about understanding what the impact of bringing light to a community would happen. And what we did see is we saw that the amount of people leaving the village reduced, we saw that people having the level of feeling safe increased from something like 22% to over 50%. We saw children starting to study more. So it does have an impact in terms of that. What it did see as well is that the average savings moving from kerosene to solar was in the region of about 2,500 Rand a month for a community, small rural community. So it has a real fundamental impact in terms of it's now finding a way of bridging that so that it can be rolled out more rapidly in other areas.
So it's a tangible economic benefit, and then it's those more intangible aspects, which of course feed into the productivity, I suppose.
Yeah. Productivity of the country, productivity of children with education, productivity of the community, because the community can now work after dark. They don't feel, the shopkeeper or the village keeper doesn't feel vulnerable to issues there. In fact, in this community, their concern was more that by having solar light now, they actually had less issues related to animals in terms of wild animals, because in Mpumalanga there are some wild animals there, but they had less concerns related to that, and their personal safety was so much impacted.
So we worry about walking down a street and whether it's lit or not, and they worry about whether they're going to be eaten by a lion or something.
Or snakes or something like that, yes.
Itotia, let's talk about the solar portable light industry in Africa, because of course the study you looked into looks at the potential of this, and you're saying that Africa is said to be the largest solar portable light industry by 2015. I mean, that's 3 years away. What is going to drive that? And tell us around the key findings of that study.
So I think just before that, I think I wanted just to tap on the theme that you've been talking about of aspiration. And from us, I think it's been an interesting development that we have seen, because these solar portable lanterns are kind of a new technology for the base of the pyramid, who have been used to the kerosene lantern. And what we've seen is a very interesting phenomenon where people are sort of like, the main barrier to overcome for consumers is that the confidence that solar does work. And we've seen them trying out kind of low-cost products, just sitting on the range of $15 kind of products. And if that works and instills the confidence in them, then there's sort of like an invisible energy ladder that they move into. So the next thing they buy, keep on buying bigger and bigger systems. And eventually, I think what we'll see in the future is that they will then move into the solar home systems, which is a really good thing, because I think there are large areas of Africa which will take quite a bit of time before they're connected to the grid. But back to your question in regards to what have we seen as the emerging trends in regards to solar portable lanterns. 2 years ago in 2010, when we did the study, we estimated that we would see growth rates of an estimated about 60 to 70% growth rates year on year. And I think we thought that we were pretty bullish with those numbers, but I think the situation that is that we are now literally sitting at about 120 to about 150% growth in this product. So a good growth. Where is it going to come from? What has been encouraging is that more and more manufacturers are identifying this as a niche market. It's a niche market for now, but I think we believe that it will be quite a significant market in the future. In 2010, we had about 8 manufacturers of what we call good quality products. Today, we have about 20 manufacturers. And in the pipeline, I think we are seeing another 10 or so manufacturers. I think the biggest challenge that we are going to see is that as the CEO for GM for Philips mentioned, is that consumer spending or consumers' affordability is a key challenge. So empowering or working through microfinance institution is going to be key in terms of unlocking that potential that consumers have. And I think ultimately I also believe as we create awareness and as consumers get that instill confidence in solar, we should be able to see that marking. So I think the third element will basically also be an element of financing. Today I think you have the entire value chain that is quite constrained in regards to access to trade finance to be able to scale up and to be able to meet the increasing demand from the marketplace.
You know, one would also assume that perhaps, even though the carbon price has been extremely depressed, the carbon credit markets might play a role in this, because of course you would be able to earn credits from being able to roll out these energy efficient programs.
Most certainly, and I think the opportunity has been taken up once again, as Irvan has mentioned, on the solar water heating side. And we have in fact in South Africa, in the Nelson Mandela Bay area, one of the largest solar water heating program around the world, but it is in fact the largest carbon registered program of its kind. We also on the lighting side see a number of suppliers and energy services companies leveraging the carbon credit opportunity as well. So you're quite right, there's volatility, and at the moment the carbon market is quite depressed. That's why from the Eskom side we do have financial incentives available which are not linked to the carbon credit. So this would really be, in the South African context, an upside on the carbon credit market. But our programs are forging ahead irrespective of the carbon pricing. We're very happy about that.
What's your sense in the kind of affordability financing aspect of this, and specifically when you're starting bringing in small businesses and of course larger businesses?
I think it's important that we encourage small businesses to extend all the way down the value chain into the rural areas. I think that's been missing from a government sort of rollout program point of view when it comes to lighting. I think quite often it ends up with the wholesalers in sort of the urban, peri-urban areas. So I think we need more microfinancing so that we can encourage small-scale entrepreneurship all the way into the rural areas, which in turn will increase uptake of these low-carbon technologies.
You know, just doing research on microfinancing, I think there's a company in India called Solek that in fact provides microfinance loans to buy solar panels for villages, for markets, and of course India had the largest blackout in history. So there are these really innovative products coming onto the market. What are you becoming aware of right now?
I definitely, we've been studying quite significantly, because there are quite a various. There's microfinance. There's also type of on-balance sheet type, pay-as-you-go type solutions. And Africa leads in a lot of very interesting things in terms of use of the internet and in terms of mobile cell phones to pay. So pay-as-you-go via cell phone, in other words, to activate someone's home system, and they pay as they go through the day. There's some really quite interesting models that I believe will actually catch on in the next 5 to 10 years. And actually, in some ways, Africa will lead in terms of certain of these areas. And we'll do this leapfrog from no light to having light in people's homes without necessary grids in many cases. And that is really quite an exciting step to be in.
Definitely this discussion of grid versus on-grid we're going to continue with. But very quickly, your view on Africa and the solar industry versus other territories, because I mentioned India, and India is a country that has got a huge energy deficit, as I mentioned, the blackout, and they've also got large solar ambitions. Yeah,
no doubt for the continent, this is the technology of the future. In South Africa, slightly different. We, from Eskom's side, have an ambition to electrify the whole country, so ultimately the grid will extend to almost to 99% of the population. But there are certain niches, even within South Africa, where solar solutions are optimal in deep rural areas. The price is coming down, and the technology is superb. As Jojo mentioned, you're now able to activate these home solar systems through your cell phone. It's quite remarkable. And I think for those of us with holiday homes, not that I have one, but I wish I did, but I would certainly have one of these to be able to remotely control the electricity supplied to remote homes. So it's definitely the way of the future, very in and very smart grid for the future as well. And
as you see this aspirational element also spilling over into the rest of the continent. Let's take a quick break right now. Big thank you, of course, to Irvan Damon from SESSA. Thank you so much for joining us. As I said, we're going to a quick commercial break. More Philips African Dialogues when we return. Do stay tuned.